Westminster, my favourite topic.
Okay, Mark McNaught back here. We have with us Chris Law to talk. We'd like to speak. Thank you so much for coming, speaking with us. What's going on in Westminster these days?
God, that's got to be the $1,000,000 question. What's going on in Westminster? Well, I'm here obviously at the conference, and I've just been watching the headlines. So Boris is currently briefing against his own boss, Theresa May. Barney is telling how much chaos is going on in terms of the negotiations, and the red line apparently that the Conservatives have got over the backstop,
which is for Ireland.
For Ireland, it's no red line that can be engaged with Europe. So, and apart from all that, it's going swimmingly well. So, I've been in Westminster since 2015. I was one of the new MPs in the surge after the referendum. I'm relatively new to politics, although I've followed politics all my life. But I was never a councillor before or what.
No, you weren't. So this was your first election.
So when you go down there into Westminster, and I can talk in detail about what Westminster is,
please do,
just in a minute. But when I first went down there, I also go down with an anthropological head-on, and I say that because my background, my studies is social anthropology. So I study social groups and why what people do in social groups.
And just quickly, did you do a thesis? Did you? What did you study for your research?
So before I became a member of Parliament, when I was a student, I was studying individuals rather than social groups, because you often get immersed into one name to cover all people. So you might talk about the Inuit, for example. But Westminster should be talked a bit like that as well. And now, incidentally, I am now I am now part of the fieldwork for SOA, which is the School of African and Oriental Studies, for a professor of social anthropology. So I'm kind of full circle, because now I am on the receiving end of the research rather than researching. And why I think we should talk about Westminster in that way is because it is quite a unique environment. In the 3 years I've been there, 3 and a bit years I've been there, I can't think. I've worked in a number of careers before this, whether it be in expeditions, whether it be running my own business in Scotland, whether it be in other parts of the world, and I cannot think that another environment which is so enclosed, which at times feels so cut off from the rest of the UK, where discussions and ideas only evolve within that bubble, and they're not receptive to what's going on outside, other than reactionary. Sorry if I'm starting to sound academic about it.
No,
but when you have reactive politics rather than progressive politics, you're always fighting fires. And so when you ask your first question to me, how are things in Westminster? I say we're all fine apart from the utter chaos. But the reason there's utter chaos is because nothing has been planned or prepared to get to a point, for example, with Brexit, where negotiations are reasonable. And as I was just saying earlier today, if this was a business and I was the chief executive, I would have sacked 50% of them by now, because they're either incompetent, too self-centered, and don't have a clue about listening to others, particularly their own constituents, to understand what the main needs are for people. So that's my little pot analysis of Westminster. So I still watch it with this kind of anthropological eye, albeit I'm part of it. But it keeps me sane, because I am only there for a short time, hopefully. I hope to be the last Member of Parliament for Dundee, because Scotland will be independent, and whilst I'm there, I will just endure the chaos that continues.
Okay. And how do you see the timing of the next referendum? I don't know if we'll discover anything big tomorrow with Sturgeon's speech, but it just seems to me as if, given the way that the talks are going, which is not good, and there's the very real possibility that the UK could crash out. Doesn't it make sense for there to be a referendum before March of next year? So if there was any danger of actually definitively leaving at least the single market and the customs union, Scotland could conceivably stay within, even if the rest of the UK crashes out. I'm just wondering if you have more insight on that.
almost a technical question, so I'll give you a non-technical answer. So technically, yes, you could have a referendum before March next year, and technically, potentially, you could remain within the EU as we could be likely to be heading to a hard Brexit. So there would be good reason, if there's a hard Brexit, to do everything you can to get to that point before next year. Logistically, that would be a lot more difficult, whether or not, and we're going to talk about the boring part here, whether or not both civil servants and officials on either side could arrange all of that in that short space of time, bearing in mind we already qualify on every level to be in the EU, then that's another question. So that's the technical side. I will say what I think. The thing, I actually spoke about this about a month ago to an event in Dundee called Pint and Politics, and I talked for about an hour at length about timing, because the time is not the most important point. It is how you get to that point. So in other words, preparedness, action, actual activity, going out and being on the doors, meeting with people, speaking to your colleagues, speaking to friends, starting those conversations again at home with your family is vital. If every person who supports independence today was to persuade just one person, we'd be over with a landslide. And that, if people can remember that, that's not huge. And that's how I started the campaign. And I won't say the individual, but I went up against some really learned individuals, that should give you a college of law, who's an old friend of mine, and we had a very public debate for about 18 months leading up to the referendum in 2014, who was completely on the other side, strong in the union, believed what it was that was best for Scotland. He's now moved since that to the position of independence, particularly because of Brexit. So Brexit plays a key part in this argument, and is now actually a member of the SNP, so I'm delighted. But I can't take all the credit for it, but I know that persistence helped as well. So to go back to timing, if you're a member of the party or you're a supporter, the time is not the most important, it's what you're doing now. So sitting behind a computer screen, I'm afraid, is just not enough. And I was guilty of that some years ago as well, so I'm not averse to that myself. But getting along to your local branch, getting along to events, marches are very important as well, but also the boring, dry stuff, getting leaflets through the doors, doing the canvassing, building support that way, getting involved in fundraising, that's really crucial. Fundraising, particularly when the date is, and if the date was to be soon, you're going to need a lot of money quick. So now would be a good time to start fundraising events. And if the time isn't soon, then it's coming, because there is a sense, there is a mood. I don't know if you're feeling it yourself amongst this conference, but even before this conference I've been feeling it. Certainly since late February onwards, there's been a sense of, okay, we're in a new space now. This is no longer trying to rerun 2014. This is, we have a new debate. The debate for independence has always been the same, but because of the circumstances, and bearing in mind we don't need to talk to ourselves, we need to talk to those who voted no, because of the circumstances of Brexit, which can impoverish Scotland, as we know, up to 9% GDP, 80,000 jobs are the figures. That impact is real, that will be felt, it will not only have an impact.
It's already beginning to be felt.
It's already beginning, but that's been austerity. But just to give you one example, the Dutch government just 2 days ago, which said, stop buying UK products. So these are real things that matter. So the debate has to be within the locus of Brexit, because that has a real and serious impact. And many people who voted no in 2014 are much more open-minded now and are much more receptive. So it's not about being right or wrong. Yeah. It's about saying, well, my view has always been Scotland should determine its own future, as does any other independent nation state, makes its decisions for itself based on the people who live there. That's a fundamental argument. But a relative argument for those who voted no, who may not believe that, or that's not for them, will be, are you going to be worse off as a result of Brexit? Would you not like to see Scotland remain in the single market and in the customs union, or even more so in the EU, in order to continue your business or continue your workplace, or make sure we protect our public services with NHS? So these are really fundamental. The other part to this is, and I'm really pleased about, is whatever your views are on the Growth Commission, it's now here. And there's discussion going on. Now, in the last 10 years, before I do the job I do just now, particularly in international development in Westminster. I work in financial services. Financial services, by and large, will know. Edinburgh, overwhelmingly. Aberdeen, significantly. People who work financial services were not convinced by the economic arguments. Whether we like to hear that or not, that is and was the case for many, many people. Because the Growth Commission is now here, it's substantial. It was a commission, so it involved a number of voices. It has produced a very sensible report, and it's given people something to discuss. Actually, and I love to put this expression online, because it's put the willies up the Tories, because they always think of themselves as the ones who protect business and the ones who protect financial institutions. Here we are having a discussion, a mature discussion of a period of time where Scotland will be independent, moving forward, where it can increase funding for public services. And for all the crap it's talked about austerity, it's not mentioned once in the Growth Commission. I know what I'm speaking about, I've read it. Apart from the context in which is we will be ending austerity. Yes, we'll be looking to reduce debt over time, but that's not something
Does
that...
Scotland actually have debt? I mean, well, they have a share.
That's a really good question.
Because obviously there's a share of an overall UK debt.
That is the context. That is the context in which you would measure it. And that would be part of the negotiations, obviously, on leaving the UK.
And is most of that debt in the form of bonds that are sold on the international market?
That would be... You're asking the wrong person. I'm thinking for that.
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to give you a substantive answer to that. Okay. It'd be a whole range of things. Commitments we already have that we're involved in projects at the moment. There'll be capital projects we'll be involved in. Just as well as bonds, but there'll be other areas as well that I'm not aware of at the moment. And there's an argument around whether or not we should accept the debt. I would say, obviously, we want to have a good relationship with the rest of the UK, and you think any civil discussions in Scotland becoming independent, that would be part of it. That's what I'd say. So I'm not about to say, by the way, I think we should just walk away and kiss it goodbye, but that's where we're at. So I think the Growth Commission has brought a good debate, and the debate is brought most of all is amongst people who are involved in the very same institutions that I, one shape or form, involved in when I worked in financial services. So, and a lot of them are low voters, and I was trying to persuade them.
Yeah.
So now, when I hear that they're having discussions and debate in the Growth Commission, that's good and it's substantive. And they'll come to their own conclusions about it. From what I hear at the moment, there's open-mindedness to it, and that's great. And there is no alternative coming from any of the unionist parties. And if they think they can sit back in another referendum and not give any real alternative, and I'm not talking about the vote, by the way, which is of course the fabrication. But if they don't give any alternative, then it's going to give us a lot more to get teeth into.
Yeah, it also seems to me as if the dynamic in a second referendum would be much more. I mean, the Yes campaign in the first one was very much on the defensive a lot of the times. Like, what currency are you going to use? What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? It seems to me as if now, as if it's very much the unionists that will be having to make the case, why Scotland should stay in, given all of the very difficult circumstances.
Well, I would certainly say it need to be.
Sorry?
What I would say is that during the 2013-2014 discussions, you're absolutely right, the emphasis was on us to prove why Scotland should be an independent country, and that we could stand our own 2 feet economically, socially, politically, and all the rest of it. And the arguments that were used were either you can't afford it or you can't have certain things, i.e. the pound, for example. It brought about, I can only describe as a political enlightenment in Scotland for so many people, because, hi George, how are you? Good to see you. Because not only was it the first time they were hearing a lot of these discussions, but secondly they were questioning their own media, which is why I'm really pleased to be here today on this, because we can talk live.
I love it. Yeah.
Another discussion. So as a result of that, there has been since 2014 for many people a better range of media, which includes live media like this, but also social media content, whether it be in written form or otherwise. And there's a lot more discussion, and it hasn't stopped. Now that is a fantastic place to be for any nation, where people lively engage, whatever side of the argument. So whenever the next referendum comes along, we're not starting from a low base. We're starting from a place of engagement. I call it enlightenment, where people are politically engaged and attuned to discussion, are far more critical about traditional forms of media. It doesn't necessarily mean they're ignoring them, but they're saying, well, let's see why they're asking these questions and what underlies them. And the other aspect to that is, of course, they're open to alternative forms of media. So I think there'll be a far more balanced debate in terms of the side for those who support the union, particularly the political parties, given the vow in 2014, which is not delivered, given Brexit, where Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain, and yet we're getting pulled out very likely against the will next week, against the political will as well as the will of the Scottish people through a parliament next week. That, for many who voted again, we need to think about those who voted no, particularly those who weren't sure. That again is giving them lots to discuss, and that's this area that I think will be where the main discussions will be.
And tell me a little bit more about this coming week, because from what I understand, the Brexit bill, for lack of a better term, went to the Lords. There were 14 amendments. 14 amendments, including to stay in the single market. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So these are. So what's interesting is at the moment, next week, it's over 2 days. It was initially supposed to be over 12 hours, which would have took us in the early hours of Tuesday morning. Could you imagine if you ran a business like this? Like, I know we'll make fundamental decisions for our organisation when most people will be in their bed. However, there's been sense on that. It's going to be over 2 days. It'll be interesting to see where Labour lie in this. I think the Conservatives will be very strong in wanting to make sure these bills get through. I have heard that up to maybe 14 will rebel, which will be interesting in the
of the Conservatives.
Of the Conservatives.
Subri and
so there'll be
Kenneth Clark.
Subri, yes, absolutely. They're the two leaders of the group, you would say. So you have up to 14 who could potentially, which would make a huge difference. But the problem is Labour is not. It's a divided party. It's a party that hasn't got a position it's clear about. Keir Starmer was very clear last week when he said on Wednesday morning that our party split down the middle over it. So he's the shadow Brexit secretary. So if he's saying that, it gives you the best indication. Corbyn and his own acolytes very much are Eurosceptic. But more than half of the Parliamentary Labour Party is now moving to a position of we would like to be in the single market, we would like to be in the customs union. And so they have this fudge situation at the moment where they're using language that's essentially the same, but not wanting to sound like they are changing their position on the EU. So if you want to ask me where they're at, I don't know, because I don't think any of us do, most of all the Labour Party. And that will have a significant impact on what the outcome is. In terms of what will happen in terms of respecting the will of the Scottish Parliament, 4 out of 5 parties did not give legislative consent for the paragraph.
In the Scottish Parliament.
Which represents their elected representatives on behalf of the Scottish people. I think it was 2/3, effectively, if you talk about individuals in the Scottish Parliament, who voted not to give legislative consent. And you may have saw PMQs last week, or you may not have, but during Prime Minister's questions, it was sorry, not Prime Minister's questions, Scottish questions from David Mundell.
Oh, right, Mundell, right.
He was saying, well, the Scottish Government needs to come to us with a better proposal. And I'm like, what bit do you not understand about democracy? What bit does it not go through to you what the Scottish Parliament is and is not allowed to do? It's been very clear from the beginning, and it's given very clear lines. So it's not, in my view, for the Scottish Parliament, and indeed the Scottish Parliament, to make a move. It is for the UK government to make that bridge in order for the powers over environment, for fisheries, for farming, just to give 3 examples, for those to be repatriated back to Scotland. So if that is ridden roughshod over by the UK government next week, then I would say that it's going to be another area where, again, people who for a better word, gave the UK a second chance by voting no in 2014, will be raising serious questions.
And are there amendments among those 14 that directly pertain to Scotland and the continuity bill?
Are we talking about Clause 11?
Oh, yeah, okay, that must be, yeah.
So the Clause 11 would be that. So it's the point is there's I think it's 14 powers, if I'm not mistaken. Am I wrong?
It's
24, sorry.
24 out of 111, if I'm not mistaken.
24 powers, that's correct. They're wanting to have the agreement made in London rather than made in Scotland, give consent to the rest of the UK.
And they gave that really bizarre definition of consent.
Where consent's not consent?
Yeah,
exactly. So what you'll find, you will find in this job, I was just talking about it the other day, that language gets twisted and turned so often, and I can only say it's for one reason: is to confuse the public. In fact, it confuses me as a politician sometimes. I'm like, when does consent not consent? What do you mean by a consent motion? So let's see what happens next week. But if it is a situation where UK government refuses to accept the position that's been taken by the Scottish Parliament and decides to go ahead anyway without consent, then I think, apart from us being very loud and vocal about it, I think people will start to see this as a question. If this is a union, what kind of union is it?
Exactly. And also they've challenged the continuity bill before the Supreme Court, I think, and I think I read there was going to be
Yes, I haven't heard an outcome.
I think it's the 26th of July, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so some weeks off here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I can't comment because I need to wait to see when it's going to happen.
But I mean, it seems to me as if given the way they decided in the Gina Miller case last year, basically that the Sewell Convention doesn't really have any legally binding force.
That came as a surprise. I remember when we debated the Sewell Convention in Parliament, we thought this was
because just to be clear, it was part of the Smith Commission recommendation that the Sewell Convention be anchored in legislation, if I understand correctly. And there was an attempt, or at least to do that in the Scotland 2016 Scotland.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
And so
we thought it was something that could be enacted properly in law, only to find out, well, not really.
Yeah.
It's not worth the paper it's written on, which is the bit that concerns me greatly about it. And we only discovered that through the Gina Miller case. So, so I don't know if that gives any more clarity to where we are at Westminster at the moment. In terms of myself and my colleagues, we're quite optimistic about where we're at in terms of the journey towards independence. There's an energy and enthusiasm and a sense of destiny would be the best way of putting it without sounding romantic. There's a sense of destiny that the journey is getting ever closer now, and the feeling then, obviously, after general election 2017, which was still the biggest party, but nevertheless losing 21 colleagues is really painful. Many of them became good friends. Of course. But nevertheless, we're back in there with the real opposition in London, even though we're a smaller group. We're very clear where we are on Brexit. We're enthusiastic about what we're all doing. We've got bigger briefs as a result, obviously, and we're making sure we stand up for Scotland in each and every one of our positions. I'm now in international development. I'm just actually back from the Ukraine just 2 weeks ago. I was at the front line with the area it's now known as the I'm trying to remember, the annexed area of Crimea. But I was there because I wanted to see what the impact is in a new independent nation state where you have a bigger partner, which in this case is Russia, which is no longer a partner, of course, but still wants to heavily influence, and of course, which now backs the so-called Russian separatist Crimea region. So there's actually an active war going on in Ukraine, and lots of misinformation and propaganda being fed into.
I just don't know what to believe, at least from any kind of from most of the media. It's just like, what is the truth? Same in Syria.
That's the whole point of it. The whole point of your response is exactly the whole point of misinformation, which is where do you turn to believe? What I have been learning, certainly, looking at the information. The various amounts of information that's happening in Ukraine. Ukraine is much more. So Ukraine's only been independent, 2004. So you're only talking 14 years. The Orange Revolution back in 2004, that many people remember as a peaceful revolution. Then there was it wasn't a revolution, but there was what's called Euromaidan, which was in 2014, where there was an uprising, very much at the street level in Kiev, which brought attention. They wanted to have much more involvement in the EU. They wanted to become a member of NATO. You can understand perhaps from a Ukrainian perspective why they might want to be a member of NATO, right on border with Russia.
And you certainly understand Russian opposition as well.
Absolutely, Russia is absolutely opposed to any of its neighbouring states being a member of NATO. And then the troubles that broke in Crimea. So for us, it was interesting because I posted quite a lot about Ukraine, particularly when I came back. And during the time I was posting, including on Twitter, I started to get individuals posting my Twitter account promoting themselves as Scottish independence supporters. Now, at first, you take it face value, but what was interesting was the first two posts I got, one was absolutely textbook classic language that was propagandist in using the kind of negative rhetoric that has been used against Ukraine by the Kremlin, calling it a fascist state, and the people of Ukraine just want to be back under Russia. I didn't know where the source of that was. The second one that came through, even had a kind of make-up Scottish name, foolishly put where its address was from. So if you look on a Twitter account, sometimes says where it is, and it said Moscow, to which I replied, how's the weather in Moscow? And it quickly disappeared. So, hi Chris. So all I would say is, for those who are watching this and who are on social media just now, are going to watch this later, is that because of what happened in 2013-14 in Scotland, many of our supporters got a little bit despondent because of the way the press treated us. I was one of the first to level blame at the BBC, for example, when I became elected through the Scottish Affairs Select Committee for what I saw as unfair coverage of the debate. But nevertheless, we're in a limited democracy where you can scrutinise and challenge it. When you live somewhere like Ukraine, which is constantly getting bombarded, where own media channels is getting paid for out with Ukraine, and it's been paid for by serious Russian interests to promote their own propaganda and to be very negative about Ukraine, they're also doing the same in Europe. And they're also doing the same in our campaign, and we need to be clear about that and to be mindful. So my message I'm really trying to say is that whatever you read on social media or you view, ask yourself where it's coming from, who's paying for it, and what's its purpose. Because to go back to the original point about you don't know who to believe, a very good example is the poisoning of the Skripals, where even Jeremy Corbyn questioned it. Now, conclusive evidence, that's not going to be easily available because it's still under investigation just now, but all the directions are pointing towards that. What was interesting is that Russia put a number of interpretations, that they've been kidnapped, that it never happened, that, and by the way, when I say kidnapped by the Brits, kidnapped by the Americans, and a variety of other theories. So you end up in a position going, oh well, maybe it never happened at all. So it was really helpful when the daughter came out and did her own press conference about 2 weeks ago to say, actually, it's really painful, this is what happened to me. I'm not put up to it by anyone, I haven't told anyone about it. And that's why I was pleased they did it to Reuters, because Reuters is a world agency rather than the BBC, for example, or an area where people might question. So I'm quite new to learning about this, I have to say, but I'm quite shocked at the level that it can involve in our democracy and obviously our debate.
All right. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Really
we went off to some tangent.
No, I always like to have good. We always like to have good in-depth discussions.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll send you the link to that conference I'm doing on Monday.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm fine, how are you?
Good.
Enjoying it?
Yes, thank you.